We're restoring a vintage Star Trek Cockpit arcade game. This is the original flyer Sega used to lure arcade operators into buying one of these mighty beasts. Now, the back of the flyer? That's where things get weird. It shows ideal locations for your brand new Strategic Operations Simulator. And apparently, Sega's marketing team threw darts at a list, because none of this makes sense. First up is the convenience store. Yeah, sure. Pick up some milk, maybe a scratch-off ticket, and play an intergalactic combat simulator next to the beef jerky display. Also, for reasons unknown, the flyer shows two kids watching their mom play the game, or maybe it's their single fun aunt who drinks white wine and owns a kayak. Hard to say. Next, the grocery store, because nothing says family shopping trip like a 400-pound spaceship simulator wedged between the produce and the checkout lanes. The photo shows a plank of wood just leaning against the cabinet, and the kid playing it has that energy of someone who refuses to take off his windbreaker. Then we move on to the bowling alley. Sure, why not? Forget bowling, just play Star Trek instead. It's in the picture. Nobody's wearing bowling shoes, not one person. It's chaos. After that comes the tavern, which is marketing's way of saying bar, but with slightly fewer bad decisions. And finally, the arcade. The one place where a Star Trek arcade game actually belongs. The flyer lists it last, like it's an afterthought. Oh yeah, also maybe put it in an arcade. If you're boring, now let's see what it takes to actually get one of these monsters running. So we've got two wooden monitor bezels for reasons unknown. Perhaps one of them is for an upright Star Trek game, which we don't have. The larger one seems to fit better, and you can peer through the holes and actually see where the bolts will go. Perfect. We're going with that one because arcade restoration is really just confidence mixed with guessing. Now, these screws, they're too long, plus they don't have hex bolts on top, so I pull out my vintage Dare ruler, and because nothing says trust me, I'm an adult. Like measuring bolts with an anti-drug giveaway from 1992, they're 3 inches long. So naturally, we decide 2.5-inch bolts will probably work. Cut to me walking into Home Depot, clutching mystery screws, trying not to make eye contact with anyone because I look like a man about to either fix an arcade game or bury it. I find the bolt gauge, try one hole, nope, try another, boom. Quarter 20. Of course it is. Every arcade part ever made is either quarter 20 or good luck finding that in stock. We get our bolts, go back home, grab the wooden bezel, touch the hole professionally, and start fitting it to the monitor. The long bolts are for mounting into the cabinet, the short ones are for attaching the monitor to the wood. Simple, except not at all. We have thousands of tiny drawers filled with stuff, but this one contains precious monitor bolts. They probably belong to one of the monitors we're hiding in the attic, but we need 4 of them now to complete the mission, so all bets are off. To attach the monitor to our wooden frame of justice, we'll be using a monkey wrench and a nut driver because there's nothing more natural to me than writing game restoration narration with the words monkey and nuts in the same sentence. Right now, I'm doing this thing where I'm assuming that the stars will align and this 100-pound monitor will mount without any problem. And why do I think that? Because I'm a dumb optimist, because so far, so good. We've got 3 out of the 4 bolts attached, and I ponder if 3 bolts is good enough. You've still got 2 in case something weird happens and one of them makes a run for it. No sooner had that thought cross my mind when I realized the 4th and final bolt wasn't gonna fit in the hole. There must be a bend in the space-time continuum around my living room. After a brief moment of hesitation, I decide that maybe bolt number 3 wasn't screwed down as well as I thought it had been. So now I'm unscrewing the top, sliding it around, praying, and click. It's in. Somewhere Bob Vila just nodded approvingly. Look how nice the 4th bolt looks all by itself with no nut. Wait, is it no nut November? Yikes. You may recall that we've received games where monitor bolt or 2 wasn't attached. We don't believe in that kind of faith, so the last nut goes on so we can move on to the next challenge. I hold up the Star Trek Monitor Shroud against our newly assembled equipment for no reason in particular. If it doesn't fit now, it's never gonna fit. It's finally tight, solid, and ready to test fit. I lift the whole thing to carry it to the game and immediately hit the kitchen ceiling. Great start. And hey, I also hate dirt, so before we go any further, we vacuum the inside of the cabinet like responsible adults. It's looking clean once again. We plate the entire contraption into the hole and it fits, barely. We start hand-threading bolts, tighten them with the drivers, and finally give our standard thumbs up all around. Now for the plexiglass bezel, it's covered in stickers, scotch tape, and 40 years of kids pointing at ships yelling, "I hate you, stupid Klingons!" As mentioned previously, there's an official SEGA sticker, so we're keeping that, because that's what makes it authentic. I take it to the kitchen for a deep clean, which is exactly what you want your guests to see when they walk in. Me washing 1980s plexiglass in the sink. I've washed a lot worse things in this sink. 90s plexiglass, for example. Yuck. And hey, the closer you get to the present day, the weirder the stuff you find stuck to your plexiglass. Don't even ask. Back to the wooden bezel. We scrub it with simple green and a magic eraser until it shines. It's bright. It's clean. It's probably still not food safe, but I like to dream. We scratch off the last of the tape residue with chemicals that shall remain unnamed for legal reasons. Remember Chernobyl? Yeah, world's worst man-made disaster, but as a bonus, they also discovered a way to remove old Scotch tape without cramping your lifestyle. We mount one of the freshly powder-coated metal bars, admire the shine, and realize, yeah, we have no idea how this goes back in the cabinet. I may need a router or divine intervention. Oh, and fun discovery. Now that the monitor's in, the fiberglass piece no longer fits, which means I get to remove the monitor again. But that's fine. We've got the screws, the bolts, and about 4 minutes before my patience expires. The good news, it's finally starting to look like a full game. The bad news, I'm probably going to be removing and reinstalling the monitor at least a dozen more times. Bet me on this one. Guess what? I somehow forgot to install one of the fiberglass panels. Just one. My wife walks in, sees it in the kitchen, and says, "Why is this spaceship part in the house?" And I'm like, "Oh, right. That's where that went." So here we are. I found the 3 bolts that hold it in place because, of course, it's 3 bolts, never 2, never 4, just the exact number that guarantees I'll drop one into the void. And naturally, I can't use a normal screwdriver. No, this thing takes a hex driver because Sega designed these panels like they were guarding state secrets. Someone might steal this panel, the engineers probably said. Yeah, good luck stealing just this part and trying to explain that to anyone. Anyway, it's on. Solid. Very nice. I've learned that with just a little finesse, brute force, and whispered swearing, things eventually line up. Inside this fiberglass box, there's supposed to be a piece of artwork, but, of course, it doesn't fit. It's too big. Way too big. Like, did someone swap the blueprints while I wasn't looking? Big. So now I'm removing the box, trying to see if it folds, rolls, or opens a wormhole. Nope. It's just from the upright version of the game, which explains everything. I fix a rogue start button wire while I'm at it because even the controls are tired of waiting. There we go, functional kind of. Meanwhile, this game's been sitting in the kitchen collecting more dog hair than a lint roller convention. So we're cleaning again! Because nothing says restoration like re-vacuuming the same arcade cabinet for the 5th time. Next up, the artwork. I marked where it should go with a purple pen because I'm a professional. After cross-referencing 5 photos in one grainy YouTube video, I'm confident I'm close. So we cut it, just a little, just enough to ruin the collector value if I'm wrong. What do you mean you haven't been to a swap meet where giant cardboard squares that go around arcade monitors are traded like Magic the Gathering cards? How's that possible? We trim the sides, snip the bottom, keep the scraps for emotional support, and hey, it fits perfectly. That's right, perfectly. It only took 42 years and a mild panic attack. Now we just need the black monitor shroud that goes around the display. I'm pretty sure I have one in the attic, which is always reassuring. Every time someone sees me heading up there, they ask, "What are you growing up there?" And I say, "Monitors," which is somehow more suspicious. Found it! It's from a Ms. Pac-Man, which explains the weird clips on the side. But it's the same size, so that's good enough for me. We unscrew the clips, don't need the tinted plexi, and it actually looks nice. We drop it into the box, everything fits, everything aligns, and suddenly this game looks like it might actually turn on someday. We're finally sliding in our assembled monitor shroud and checking all the edges as we're pushing it in. We're pushing and pushing and pushing. Did I mention the pushing? We could probably do some sanding to make this easier, but that's not what we're about. Pretty sure. My ship needs a little touch-up paint, and specifically black paint, and not just any black paint. This is the kind of oil-based black that could make a goth kid say, "That's a bit much." I shake it up like I'm auditioning for a paint can percussion band, and we're off. We're painting the interior of the cabinet so dark that light itself files for workers' comp. Now, I'm not goth, okay, maybe a little goth, but more of a non-practicing goth. I like the aesthetic, but I don't have the stamina for eyeliner. Anyway, I'm painting the inside of the bezel because if the wood peeks through, it ruins the illusion that this whole thing wasn't built in 1982 by caffeine and chaos. It's harmless, looks great, and dries faster if you attack it with a hairdryer, which I do because I am allergic to waiting. Once the paint's dry, it's time for my favorite part, the T-molding. One side of the little box was missing it, so I cut a fresh piece to match. And now, the best part, I get to use the rubber mallet. This tool doesn't get enough credit. It's quiet, powerful, and somehow therapeutic. Every time I whack something with it, I feel like I'm fixing my life. The new trim fits perfectly. Slide it back into place, reconnect the player one start button wire for the 400th time, and we're back in business. On the bottom, though, there's a metal plate held in with 5 screws, upside down screws naturally, because SEGA wanted this to be a test of faith. They're hex screws too, which means I have to use that weird little square driver that feels like a tool designed by a man who hates joy. But it's in! It's mounted! It's solid! And for no reason at all, I tap the start button like I just accomplished something huge. Next, I'm cleaning the inside again because apparently that's all I do now. It's spotless. We're ready to start building everything inside the cabinet. First up, hook up the video cable to the monitor. No power yet because I value my eyebrows. And then I find the start button wire hanging loose. Perfect. Time to make a spade connector. I put one on even though I'll never unplug it again in my lifetime, but it looks right. Besides, real professionals don't just twist their wires together, they give them accessories. Spade connectors are like silver earrings for electricity, stylish and yet functional. Then I replace the old 44 incandescent bulbs with shiny red LEDs because I'm not a caveman. Incandescents burn out, LEDs just silently judge you forever. I found 2 reference photos online, which is great, except they both contradict each other, and since no manual exists anywhere, I bought one, a real Cockpit manual. This thing's a relic. I should scan it and share it online, but first I'm just going to stare at it like it's the Dead Sea Scrolls of arcade wiring. Before we wrap up, we're syncing the power supplies. I've got 2 of them, one pretty, one less so. We're matching the wiring so they both look equally competent. This first power cable needs some connectors, so we do that. We'll get a plug that isn't plugged in yet and throw down some magic in the editing room, and look at that, now it's done. It matches exactly. Incredible, except for there's another wire that's also butchered. Look at that over there, it's missing this. What is this, a 4-pin connector? Let's throw down some magic, and now there, everything is all done. We've done it, everybody. I'm happy. Are you happy? Hey, thumbs up, yeah! Finally, we measure the inside of the cabinet for the mounting board. I say measure, but what I really mean is eyeball it aggressively. Precision is for people with patience. I've been running on enthusiasm and caffeine for the past week. So where are we now? We've reached that point in the project where a simple piece of wood is suddenly responsible for everything. This one board has to hold all the power components, like it's the command deck of the Starship Enterprise, except made from Home Depot plywood. I've roughed out my cuts, laid everything on top, and realized that one of these power supplies is just here for moral support. We're using a modern switching power supply instead of the old linear one because, frankly, I enjoy not dying. Safety glasses on, circular saw ready, and here we go! Cutting wood! You can't beat the thrill of cutting a perfect rectangle while pretending you know what you're doing. Although, full disclosure, you should not pretend because, you could lose, maybe a finger. Look at that. It fits. 1 board down, 17 more decisions to go. I start mounting all the parts and immediately notice a problem. One of the connectors, J1, is missing a wire. I check every cable, every bag, and yes, I organize my wires in Ziploc baggies like a person who definitely has a system and is absolutely fine. Time to visit Ace Electronics. I grab some wire, then I go home, get online, and immediately order more from Mouser because I don't know when to stop. 15-pin connectors? Yeah, give me 6 sets, and I like options and regret in equal measure. The new connectors feed into this little adapter board that handles the button, spinner, and start button. Basically, it's the social hub of the game. I label everything so I don't accidentally rewire the Enterprise into a microwave. Video editing is magic, and boom, we've got a cable. Wait, is it too short? That's what she said. No, it's fine, it's perfect. It even has a bonus ground wire because we're classy like that. It's time to wire up the power adapter, which can only mean one thing. New mystery cables keep appearing like I subscribe to a monthly Wire of the Month club, and yes, I know, I already told you I had a whole bag of random wires. These are different wires. These are wires with ambition. A little editing magic later, bam, we've got a brand new power connector cable ready to unite our game boards with their source of energy like some sort of intergalactic extension cord. Now, you might remember the two transformers we looked at earlier. Well, guess what? We're also using a computer power supply to feed even more voltage to the electronics. This thing needs a traditional plug, which might seem odd until you realize arcade cabinets have been doing this secretly inside their cabinets since the 80s. Do they have regular household plugs aboard the USS Enterprise? Excellent question. If so, Scotty's been running life support off a power strip this whole time. I make an inlet plug and a splitter so everything has a place to live, and suddenly this thing looks almost professional. The power's coming in here, the ground's over there. It's all very freaking awesome. Now we drop the board into the cabinet. It weighs about 40 pounds, which is roughly the weight of my self-doubt. Plugging in wires, checking everything twice, and this is exciting. I've never gotten this far without something catching fire. But hey, the night is young. We're getting close, and I'm gonna turn on the power and see what happens as soon as the white and black cables are on. Something's up. I spot a couple more cables that are not plugged in. And they're identical, so what can go wrong? I got a 50-50 chance. Let's power up. Ooh, that's not a sound you want to hear. Let's turn off the power, and we're gonna have to figure out what we just did. That was not a good sound. Oh my god, I think I smell burning. There's always tomorrow, and tomorrow we're chasing the big one. Actual power. We'll find the right fuse, pop it in, and maybe, just maybe, we'll finally hear that sweet startup hum. Until then, if you enjoyed watching me risk electrocution for nostalgia, please drop a like, subscribe for more retro adventures, and ring the bell so you don't miss it when this Star Trek cockpit finally powers on. Stay tuned, the next episode might just engage warp drive.